Well, I'm sure you know that I've been doing quite a bit of media over the last few days about the renegotiations, about David Cameron's visit to Brussels this week to meet the leaders of the large political groups in the European Parliament, but also the summit later this week with other leaders of EU countries. But I also wanted to have the chance to answer some of the questions that you sent in to me. So let's take a look at the questions here.
Question 1. What happened at the Conference of Presidents? Was it successful? And what happens next this week?
Well, actually, in the end, what happened was that David Cameron preferred to have one-on-one bilateral meetings with the leaders of the large political groups. And the reason he did that is because he wants to make sure that the deal that leaves the European Parliament is as close as possible to the deal that's agreed this week with the leaders of the other EU countries. The European Parliament has a role to play, and it could possibly amend some of the changes, particularly on the issues of migrant benefits, but maybe on some of the other constitutional issues. And he wanted to make sure that the vote that was put, or the issues that were put to the British people, were not significantly changed by the European Parliament, because this could well happen after the referendum in the UK. So he spoke to the leaders of the large political groups, and on the whole, there was an agreement to say that we won't try and change the thrust of what is agreed by the leaders of the EU countries this week, and we'll try and make sure that the deal that leaves the European Parliament is as close as possible to the deal that's agreed this week.
Question 2. Could the deal still change? Who's opposed and why? And is it not the democratic will of the British people that matters?
Well, the deal hasn't been finalised. We're pretty close to a deal in the 4 areas. The Eurozone versus a non-Eurozone, the issue of power for national parliaments, the issue of migrant benefits, the issue of ever closer union, and the issues of more competitiveness, or making the EU more competitive. There are clearly some areas that still need to be resolved, and we hope that there could be a deal this week, but that hasn't been finalised. So there could still be some changes in the details. Now, once this deal is agreed here this week, and if it is agreed, at some stage it will have to come to the European Parliament. And the reason that David Cameron was in Brussels earlier this week to talk to the leaders of the groups was to get them to say to him, we won't change the deal that much, don't worry about it. Is it not the democratic will of the British people that matters? Well, frankly, it doesn't matter at the end of the day if David Cameron says it's a good deal or not, or whether German MEPs or British MEPs say it's a good deal or not. Actually, what matters at the end of the day is the will of the British people. And it will be the British people who have the final say. So actually, you're absolutely correct. It is a democratic will of the British people that matters.
Question 3. When will we know when the deal has been made, and when will we get to see it in full?
Well, if a deal is agreed at this week's summit, we should be able to see the details over the next few days and a final document very soon. That will allow those people, including myself, who want to look at the real detail of the document and the real detail of the deal, to look into this in much further detail before making their final decision.
Question 4. I've seen some media this week saying the European Parliament may change the deal after we've voted on it. Is that true? Some media, on the other hand, say that the European Parliament will just rubber stamp it.
Well, it is true in theory that the European Parliament can change the deal. Let's not forget that the European Parliament has equal power with the 28 governments of the EU when it comes to EU legislation that eventually becomes British law. And so David Cameron recognised that, and that's why he came to Brussels on Tuesday morning to talk to the leaders of the large political groups. I'm the leader of the European Conservatives and Reformists group, the third largest group in the European Parliament, and what David Cameron wanted was that if he could get agreement in principle not to change any deal too much, then that would convince the British people that the deal that's agreed this week is as close as possible to the deal that will finally be agreed.
Question 5. Do you think there is actually a prospect that Britain could leave the EU, and what might that look like?
Well, yes, there is a prospect, because I can't predict the way that the referendum will go, and I've been going around London speaking at events called Listening to London events about the referendum. And it's quite clear by speaking to people in the room, there are people who've already made up their mind they're going to leave, whatever happens. There are people who've already made up their mind they'll stay, whatever happens. And there's a chunk in the middle who are undecided. Some waiting for the details, some waiting to have more discussions and debates about the issue. So there's a real prospect that Britain could leave. What would that look like? Well, there's a huge debate about what that would look like. And actually, that uncertainty is one of the strong arguments that the Stay campaign have. But what is quite clear is that if Britain did leave, we wouldn't be like North Korea. People would still want to trade with Britain. British companies would still want to sell to the rest of the world. Britain would have to sign new trade agreements with countries all around the world, including possibly with the EU. And we're not quite sure what the details of that EU-UK deal would be like. And probably one of the areas of tough negotiations would be the areas in which Britain is strong, such as financial services. Would we get a good deal with the EU in financial services? For some people, that's a critical matter. Others say it doesn't matter because we've got freedom to trade with the rest of the world. Okay, that seems to be all the questions. Thank you very much. If you've got any more questions, please send them in. I'd be very happy to answer them. Thank you.